to Sports Scene Culture Conversations powered by Reebok. My name is Lerai and I am your host. Sports Scene created this platform for us as the youth to have meaningful conversations about topics that are usually sidelined. And today, in light of the United Nations World Health Day, we're having a conversation about health, with a specific focus on mental health. Now, of course, I cannot do this alone. I always have amazing women to have a conversation with me today. And today we've got member of CovidComms Tessa Dooms, as well as holistic wellness advocate, digital entrepreneur, and founder of Trove Wellness, Juanita Khumalo. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today. We've had already an amazing conversation earlier on, which you guys weren't a part of. But I just really want to open up the floor for us to have this conversation about mental health and what it's meant for us during this time, during COVID times, as well as specifically for us as women in South Africa. I know that you guys have been focusing a lot on health and wellness in general in your careers, but how has this really affected your work during the time of COVID? I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think COVID has brought to the surface a lot of the issues that South Africa has already been dealing with. Issues around people having pressure on unemployment, people having pressure around poor access to health services, poor access to a lot of social services. And so COVID has just kind of made that so much worse for people, and that we're facing our challenges in ways that we've never had to face them before. Nobody knew what a lockdown was a year ago. Nobody knew what it meant to be restricted in your movement and restricted in the way that you could do things. And for the majority of South Africans, that meant a restriction on just, the ability to just get your life moving from day to day. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's been important to think about what it means for South Africans, what it means particularly for South Africans who are not able to live in the privilege of, I can just work from home, or I can just do this, or I can just do that can find ways around COVID. Mm-hmm. We have to think about the majority of the country, and that's the reason why I got involved with a platform like CovidComms that was about giving information to people that can be empowering to them, that can help them navigate their lives and take some of the pressure off, because it's that pressure that causes some of the mental health issues that we're feeling and experiencing.
I love that. Juanita, what's your take on it?
Look, I think from a personal perspective, especially considering that I'm an entrepreneur, COVID-19 completely affected the way I do business. Not just business, but also my mental well-being was put to the test. For example, my main aspect of my company, we host fitness events, and I'm looking at about groups of 600 ladies to 1,000 ladies.
What?
So we couldn't have any of those. Luckily for us, the first one we had was beginning of March, 7th of March. Little did we know that end of the month things were going to get closed down forever. So we had 3 more planned, one in Joburg, one of our biggest ones in Cape Town. We had to be okay, cool, we are closing shop for the rest of the year. So it literally put a huge financial strain from a business perspective, but also it really, really, really taught one to actually be very, very agile and see how you can, do business differently. And it really forced us into that corner where we had to be reinventive. If you're working in radio, having to record from home, having to pivot everything online. So luckily for us, the plan was to eventually move into the digital online space. That really just catapulted it in that direction. And for someone as an entrepreneur, you are always stressed, let's be honest. It's not an easy journey, especially in the first year or two of entrepreneurship. So your mental well-being can be compromised, especially if what you were doing is not going according to plan. So I think for me, because I had to be together, and I had to take care of myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in all these regards, in order for me to be able to give. Because I'm in the wellness space, my job is to serve and to give, but you can't do so from an empty cup. So I had to prioritize my own sanity, my own well-being, and that goes for mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So it came with quite a few curveballs that one would have never expected.
Juanita, you actually have a background in brand strategy and corporate finance. How did you move from that and going into a business that is completely focused on wellness and well-being? What was the sort of motivation for you to going into a business like that?
So for me, it all started with my own personal journey. I didn't just wake up and decide that, hey, I want to go into fitness and wellness and do all of this. I mean, it began in 2017 where I was in corporate, like you said now. But at that point in my life, I was going through a very, very rough patch, you know, personally. I just lost my grandmother. I was in a very, very toxic relationship, and I was not eating well. I wasn't exercising. I was drinking more by, you know, self-medicating with alcohol and food. And one day I looked in the mirror and I could not recognize the girl looking back at me. And I said to myself that life's too short to live a life less than what you are supposed to be. And I told myself I'm going to turn my life around because I just couldn't recognize this woman in front of me. And that's how my journey to fitness started. I started with running, cutting down on alcoholic beverages. I started eating more nutritionally dense food, and that happened for quite a bit of time. I eventually got around to losing the weight. I eventually started being healthier, fitter, more energetic, and starting to feel a little bit more like, you know, like myself.
Tessa, Juanita spoke about how that has impacted her life particularly. And because you have such a vast academic background in psychology and sociology, I want to find out sort of how you've seen wellness contributing towards the people around you, people that you've worked with, because you have that academic background. What has it been like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't underestimate the value of health, right? And one of the things that I learned early on studying and thinking about health is that often we focus on disease and trying to get rid of disease. And somebody said to me, if you looked at the word disease, all it is actually is dis-ease. That's all it is. But if you're focusing on the dis-ease and all you're trying to do is combat disease, you're actually not getting healthy. You're just always fighting off disease, but you're not actually thinking about what does it mean to be healthy? What does it mean to be well? What does it mean to achieve well-being? And I think that needs to be the focus of the way in which we think about health. So when we talk about the healthcare system, the first thing that should come to mind is not a hospital. Hospitals are not where health happens. Hospitals is where disease gets dealt with. We have to think about health as something that starts at our homes, that starts with ourselves, that starts in our lives, with our families, in our communities. How do we create healthy environments? How do we create healthy families? How do we create, a health that we experience in our day-to-day lives? A friend of mine did some work on the concept of bopilo. And he was saying, if you looked at the way African ontologies are structured, actually, there is no word for health in many African contexts.
Okay.
The word is life. It's about life. We actually need to be pursuing life.
How important effective and honest communication has been in a time like this where, you know, we have social media, where so much fake news has been going around. We were told, especially at the beginning of it, people were just throwing in their opinions, and you saw how people were unable to deal with it. People were panicking immediately, buying tons and tons of toilet rolls that they didn't need and all of that, you know. What was CovidComms' role in all of that, and how has sort of the effect been throughout this entire period?
Yeah, so CovidComms started as a response to the fact that when COVID, when we started learning about COVID and hearing about COVID, there was just so much uncertainty, and communication or information is power. And we wanted to empower people again. And I remember one of the first things, because CovidComms is a volunteer network, one of the first pieces of information we started putting out was little infographics that were like, in your family, if we have to go into lockdown, it was actually even before lockdown started. Like, if we have to go into lockdown, what is your lockdown plan? How many times a week are you going to shop? Who's going to be the person in your family who's less vulnerable, who can go to do the shopping? How are you going to connect with people in your community? What will happen if you have a crisis at home? Here are helplines and hotlines if something goes wrong. We wanted to give people resources.
Juanita, so Tessa touched on the fact that she was talking about us. We have to all change, and we have to care about each other and care about protecting each other. And one thing that you mentioned about your company and the wellness events that you had, which, you know, obviously due to COVID, you couldn't continue with that. But the fact that you chose to have hundreds and hundreds of people coming to that, how important is it to, when you're focusing on wellness, how important is it to have, instead of just doing it alone in your own space, how important is it to have it with lots of people and to sort of create a community out of going through that journey?
I think for me, it's incredibly important. And when you look at why Trove was started, it was mainly because of that. Realize that, for example, in Johannesburg, for example, unlike Cape Town, there's not a lot of, you know, fitness activities that you can do, you know, during the day where you and your friends can go together, or you can bring your children and have a fun day. It's always like adult activities in the evening, you know. So I think for me, I realized that there's a huge potential, there's a huge group of women that love being fit, that love moving, and it's turned into a social thing. But there is no environment where they can go to for knowing for a fact that they can have that. So that's why Trevor started, to be like, you know what, guys, here's an organization and we are giving you guys access to this, some of the best fitness trainers you can find, some of the most amazing giveaways, and we have stalls. So it's not just so you come exercise and go. It's some of these stalls you can get your hair done, your makeup retouched, your nails done. There's a whole lot of fun and exciting activities that you can do.
Yeah, so we're really focusing on a lifestyle here.
Yes.
I think the main thing here, and I liked what you said when you were saying, looking at the word disease, it's just a disease, and how we actually, instead of looking at the problem, or not at a problem, but just maintaining your life in general, so that you don't get to a point where you have to fix an issue and fix a problem. So then how do we incorporate our mental health into this lifestyle that is, at the end of the day, going to be healthy, so that we don't have to be in a position, or where we normalize, I guess, dealing with mental health issues. And it's not a thing of, oh gosh, I have to go to a psychologist, a therapist, or whatever, which can be very intimidating, especially for people of color. How can we already now start implementing sort of solutions within our lifestyle that normalize and make it okay to deal with your mental health? And I think you have sort of touched on it in terms of bringing wellness into making it a lifestyle, you know, and that's what you've done. And you spoke about how it's really changed your life, the entire trajectory of it.
I mean, before we reach, I'll just touch on one point in
Okay.
terms of like what I've done even above. I think the most important thing that I've learned when it comes to taking care of my well-being is to set boundaries. And we don't realize how setting boundaries is so important. Setting boundaries with loved ones, with family, with friends, and as well as setting boundaries online. So for example, if you know for a fact that you can get triggered very easily, I would, for example, cut the amount of time I spend, for example, i.e. on, for example, Twitter, or watch the news. Mainly because news, triggering information is lit, and that could literally take you a couple of steps back. So what I have done in part of my everyday regime, I don't watch television as much. I'm very intentional about the content which I consume. I follow like-minded women on social media because I know that that's the content I want to see. I want to go on my page and be motivated and feel encouraged. You get what I'm saying?
And let's sort of brainstorm on how we can implement solutions in our everyday lives now, because I think the scariest parts about COVID and what it's done, and I think it daunts me so much, especially mentally. I deal with this issue so much internally, is that, is this the new normal? Are we going to go back to normal? And it can be a bit depressing at times, you know. It could really bring like a dark gray cloud over you, you know. So how can we look at how people in society dealt with that specific situation and how we implement the solutions now?
Yeah, I mean, when COVID started, a few friends of mine, all in their kind of 30s or late 20s, were like, guys, this is the second pandemic of our lifetime. We're having to live through 2 pandemics, really? That's our lives? But I remember having one conversation with a friend who was like, she was a teenager during the period that we were at the height of the HIV pandemic and like going into varsity. And her entire understanding of sex and sexuality had to be defined around the idea that HIV was a reality, and the way in which we crafted our sexual lives would need to change. And that's exactly where we are now, just with different things. Then we were talking about starting to use condoms. Now we're talking about masks. Same, you know. If you come into the world in 2020, you think using condoms is just a normal thing.
Yeah.
In the 1990s and the early 2000s, nobody wanted to use a condom. There was even a stigma around condoms. It's actually the reason why flavored condoms became a thing. Because you had to like coax people into the idea, this is fine, it's normal, it's not going to take away from your manhood, it's not a sign that somebody doesn't love you. Those were the conversations we were having, and we did create a new normal. We created a normal where now HIV hasn't gone away, but we've gotten to a healthier place as a society when it comes to our relationship to HIV. We have destigmatized testing. That's another thing within COVID that we actually need to destigmatize. People don't want to test during COVID because they don't want the stigma of saying, I tested positive for COVID-19.
How do we sort of change the stigma as well? How do we destigmatize the idea of what you put into your body? Because I think a lot of the time when we're faced with this idea of, okay, you need to eat healthy, the first thing that you think about is, it's expensive, it's I can't afford to eat healthy because of how you need to take this supplement and that and whatever it is, you know. So how do we change that mindset into implementing it into our new lifestyle? Because I think that's what our overarching theme is, that we changing things and changing our lifestyle, and that's how we make things normal, and that's how we sort of, you know, live a new life that is healthy at the end of the day.
Look, there's this other quote I think is so profound. It's called, it says, let food be thy medicine. And that is essentially what food is there to do. People don't understand that your body is an organism, and it needs to be fed, and it needs to be fed nutrients, and it needs to be given energy in order for it to function and to be healthy. And we need to start seeing and maybe driving more education around what food is and what the role that food plays in your body. And I think that's why most people, particularly guys who know it or not, that's why it's always harder for them to change their mindset around food, mainly because they don't understand the role that food plays for your well-being. They don't understand the role it plays for your mental well-being. And once you understand what food is, people don't know that, you know what, food is essentially that. It's there to give you energy and there to give you nutrients to allow your organs to function the way they need to function. If you're not going to give your body certain nutrients which come from food, that's when you start to develop, you know, lifestyle diseases. Diet is the most important and the most crucial part of maintaining a healthy well-being, a healthy lifestyle.
I like what you're saying, because I also had to deal with something like that personally last year, funny enough, during lockdown, where I was diagnosed with iron deficiency anemia, and I really started paying attention to my body. I could feel how tired I was feeling, and when I had to change my diet, because I really had to do it, I had to take my iron supplements, I had to eat iron-rich food. That caused me to learn about the food that I was eating. And I think for me, it was a thing of not changing my diet completely and like, okay, now we only eat this, and this, and this. But it's making those little adjustments in life. And I like us using the food as a symbol, you know, because it really represents what health in general means, which is what we're talking about, and how if we just take the time to learn about what comes into us mentally, physically, emotionally, if we take the time to learn about it and really pay attention to ourselves and our surroundings, then we will so slowly start seeing our life changing to a point where we don't have to now come and fix issues and fix problems, fix diseases, but we're now living in ease instead of dis-ease, you know what I'm saying?
100%.
So thank you so much, ladies, for actually coming here. And I love how we could actually come to a point where we're like, listen, guys, it's not about having to do things drastically. It's the little things that you change. It's putting boundaries within your friends and family, your own life, what you allow into your space. And that overall changes your life and the trajectory of it, just like you said, Juanita. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining me today and having this conversation. I can already see that health and mental health specifically is such a vast topic that we can go on and on and on about. But I'm going to stop now. And please just quickly, before we leave, share your social handles. Where can we find you?
Yeah, so for me, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter. If you just look for Tessa Dooms, you'd probably find me. But on Twitter, I'm at Tessie18. Facebook, Tessa Dooms. LinkedIn, Tessa Dooms. And yeah, we can continue conversations there about all things health, life, policy, public issues, social issues, because we need to have these conversations.
Thank you. And you, Juanita?
You can find me on Instagram. It is Juanita Khumalo with an H. On Twitter, it is Juanita, Juanita_Khumalo. Same as Twitter, or of course, you want to reach out to me on email. It is info@juanitakhumalo.com.
Okay, and how can we find the organizations that you ladies are a part of, that you work with, as well as your company?
Yeah, so CovidComms, you can just look up on Twitter, probably the easiest one.
Okay.
And we also have a website, covidcomms.org.za, so you'll be able to find us there.
Okay, and you?
Same for me. We've got a website, www.trove, Trove, wellness.com. That's where you can reach us and communicate with us.
And that's it from me and these two lovely ladies, guys. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of season 2 of Sports Scene Culture Conversations. I can't believe we're already in season 2. I can't wait to see you guys on our next episode. And for now, bye.